ahead and get started. We're here for convention training tonight, and we are lucky enough to have someone who really knows a lot about the process, Ms. Deborah Medina.
And this is Sarah. Sarah's been doing a lot of work around the Houston area, and I'm not sure how many others of you here might have had some part in helping put the training together, but thank you very much. We've had lots of changes with the redistricting process this year, so while for some of you conventions are getting to be old hat, we've got so many changes in the cycle this year that I think it's important for us to kind of review together. I was at an event one day last week, and one of the new folks came up and was asking me some questions, and I swore up and down that they didn't know what they were talking about, and lo and behold they did, and I didn't have all my ducks in a row yet. I've tried to brush up on all of the changes, reread the San Antonio court order again today, and have a copy of the new revised, I guess if you will, RPT rules. Certainly I am certainly a very old hand at conventions in Texas. I've been attending precinct and county and state conventions since the early 90s. I have never been an election judge. I have never been a precinct chair, but I have been the vice chair of my local party and 2.5 or 3.5 terms as the county chair of the Wharton County Republican Party. Our party in that little rural county, which is southwest of Harris County, really is kind of a microcosm of some of the problems that we've seen evidenced around the state. And in 2007, as we were seeing a renewed interest, if you will, of grassroots activists around the country and certainly here in Texas for that presidential campaign, Gene McIver, who was at the time coordinating the Ron Paul 2008 presidential campaign, asked me to start helping with some of the training down in this area. I had worked nearly 20 years kind of in conjunction with her to try to get people involved in the process. I think many of us don't recognize how critical the political parties are to the policy debates and direction that occur in our country. And we influence that by getting involved at the local level and making our voices heard through that process. Typically that starts on the night of the primary elections. Primary elections are held usually in Texas the first Tuesday in March of even-numbered years, and usually that evening you have a precinct convention at your polling place or at some place within the precinct that's posted. Notice of that precinct convention needs to be posted at the polling place. This year, because of changes in redistricting and the very late primary, most counties are not holding precinct conventions, and so I'm going to walk through a little bit of what we normally do and how that's changed this time. You should have two handouts. One is kind of a PowerPoint that you can take notes on, and then the other is I think a copy of an email because there's some question about who gets to participate and how. So there is this very public, prominent political process called elections, and everybody knows that we have elections, and everybody knows that they ought to vote, and you have to be registered to vote, and very small percentages of the voting age public actually bother to take the time to vote. But there's lots of media attention about that issue. There's plenty of publicity. Anybody who cares to know can find out about elections. Generally, elections occur for county and state and national offices where candidates align themselves with a particular political party, and the major parties in Texas, the Democrat Party, the Republican Party, have a primary in March of even-numbered years. And that's a nominating process. It's a way to choose our all-star team, if you will. We're picking one individual for each office on the ballot, And the Democrat Party picks one individual for each office on the ballot, and the minor parties have caucuses and conventions in Texas. So you may see Libertarian candidates, Green Party candidates, independent candidates. Each of those various party candidates end up on the general election ballot in November, and that's how people are elected. City elections, school board elections, in many of the larger counties around Texas have moved to November general election date, but they used to be in May. And so most people are pretty familiar with that process. It's a public election process. What folks are less familiar with is this political process. What happens? How many of you have been to a precinct convention before? So just about a little over half of the room here. Normally, precinct convention, the rules for participating in a precinct convention are that you voted in the party's primary. These are not just Republican Party rules. These are guidelines laid out in the Texas Election Code, and it prescribes that anybody who voted in that party's primary is eligible to participate in their convention. There's no proxy voting at convention. You want to vote, you got to show up and cast your vote. The purpose of that precinct convention is to elect delegates to the county or Senate district convention and to initiate the party's platform. The party platforms are rewritten every 2 years at the state level and every 4 years at the national level. They often look a lot like the last version, but they are in fact wholly new documents, and they start at the precinct convention. This year, since most counties are not having a precinct convention, we're holding, I know Sean's from Galveston. Is anybody from any other county besides Harris here? Oh, Greg, sorry. Greg's from Austin County. Your convention is actually April 14th. And y'all's is, Galveston's the 21st, and Harris County is the 21st, right? So this year there aren't, in this area, there aren't precinct conventions. So how do we decide who gets to go and participate in the Senate District Convention? And you're going to see in that handout that Senate District and County Convention are usually slashed and hyphenated. Counties in Texas that have only one state Senate district have a county convention. But if your county is bifurcated by Senate district lines, if you have more than one state senator, or if you have part of your county falls into more than one state Senate district, that's a better way of saying that, then you have Senate district conventions, and those conventions should be held within the confines of your Senate district. One of the problems we've seen down in Galveston County is they really hold a county convention instead of breaking apart and having Senate district conventions. The election code prescribes that your Senate district convention will be held in your Senate district. So if you live in Dan Patrick's state Senate District 7, you ought to expect that your Senate district is somewhere in that area. It's not down in Clear Lake, right? His district doesn't go to Clear Lake, I don't think. Unless your party executive committee takes action and says we're going to be in the same building because of logistics issues, but even then, you have to be in separate areas. Only people eligible living in, registered to vote in Senate District 7 can participate in the Senate District 7 convention. Normally you start with precinct convention. This first level occurs on the night after the primary. You move to county and Senate district, which is a level. You don't do both, a county and a Senate district. You either do a county convention or Senate district convention. And you move to state convention. Those conventions, those three conventions, happen every 2 years, even numbered years. In a presidential election year, like 2012, you also have a national convention. So we're going to rewrite the Texas Republican platform every 2 years. And when we have a national convention, that Texas platform, the one we voted on here, is going to be sent up to the Republican National Convention for them to consider our platform ideas as they craft the Republican National Party platform. Okay? So this political process, this convention process, is about two things. It's about writing the platform, and it's about choosing the leadership of the party at the state level. You're going to vote in the primary for the leadership of your party at the county level. Each voting precinct has an elected precinct chair, and each county in Texas has an elected county chairman. Those people file for office and they run for office just like the guy running for county sheriff, county commissioner, or the women running for governor. They file an application for a place on the ballot and they run. The people elected as precinct chairman and as your county chairman make up your county party executive committee, and they conduct local county business. At your state convention, you will elect one man and one woman from each Senate district to sit on the state party's executive committee, and you will elect a state party chair and a state party vice chair. Every 4 years, so those are 2-year terms, every 4 years you will also elect at the state convention a Republican National Committee man and a Republican National Committee woman, one man and one woman from Texas, who will represent us on the Republican National Committee, the executive committee of the Republican Party of the United States of America. In addition to those two people, the state party chairman also sits. So we have, Texas has every state has 3 representatives on the Republican National Committee. So this year, in addition to voting on your party platform, your party rules, your party's state executive committee, you will also, if you go to the state convention, be choosing our representatives on the Republican National Committee, as well as the delegates to the Republican National Convention, which is in Tampa, Florida, in August.
Yes.
And those individuals will nominate the Republican Party's candidate for President of the United States. So probably that's what most of you are here for tonight, is to kind of figure out what that process is. Whether you ever plan to advance beyond your local convention or not, your participation is critical, because you're choosing leadership and you're helping set the tone and the direction for future choices that are made. And as I said, the party's platform is rewritten every 2 years. I've spent probably the first 20 years of my political career worried about the platform. I mean, Greg and I have had this conversation. We're dotting I's, crossing T's, and arguing over jots and tittles, or is it dots and tittles? Nobody in elected office seems to pay much attention to that. Have you noticed?
That's the truth. I don't know why they get so worked up over it, because they don't follow it.
And what we found was that, or at least it would be my perspective, that's a very convenient bone to throw out to all of these energized delegates, rather than letting them focus on the rules. Because if you focused on the rules, you might actually get around to changing some things. For example, for a number of years, there's been an effort at the state convention, as long as I've been going, since the early 90s, to adopt what is called Rule 41. And boy, you'll go and you'll see these Ghostbuster-like, no Rule 41. You know what Rule 41 said? If you want a place on a Republican Party ballot, you've got to fill out a questionnaire on the platform. you've got to go through the platform and tell me whether you support, oppose, or are undecided on this measure within the party's platform. God, no, we can't ask our candidates whether they support or oppose the party platform. That would just be horrible.
Yeah.
Well, how are we going to do a better job of deciding who our nominee ought to be and who our elected officials ought to be if we don't understand where they stand? There was some discussion. There's been some discussion. Anybody in here know who Dennis Kucinich is? Kucinich sued the Democrat Party of the state of Texas. Do y'all remember that?
Oh.
The Democrat Party of the state of Texas wanted its candidates to swear an oath. Kucinich didn't want to swear the oath. He sued the party and said, they said, you don't swear the oath, you don't get on our ballot, essentially. And he said, I'm not swearing the oath and I'm suing to get on your ballot. And what did the Supreme Court say? Is the party a public entity or is it a private club? It's a private club. Your country club gets to set the rules for your membership. This party gets to set the rules for our membership. We say you have to sign an oath, you have to pledge to do something to be on our ballot, then by golly, you got to take that pledge. We're not saying you can't run for president, Mr. Kucinich. You just can't run on our ticket. You want to go run as an independent? You want to go run on somebody else's ticket? Have at it. But if you want on our ticket, these are the rules you have to follow. So we said, you know, most of us have recognized, many of us in the grassroots have recognized that incumbency is a big problem in office. And maybe we ought to think again about term limits. We put term limits on our party officials. We don't put term limits on our public officials. Maybe we ought to look at that as not a punishment for those officials, but a means of protecting them, a means of recognizing that politics is corrupting. We want to leave them there for a limited period of time, and then we want them to have to come home. So are our elected officials ever going to pass term limits?
No.
They're never going to limit themselves. But could we, as a party, say, you're not, what do we say now? You got to live in the district, you got to be a certain age, and you got to fill out this application, you can run. What if we also said you cannot have served in the office? Any of you a member of a Baptist church like me? How many years can you be deacon? You can't be deacon for a lifetime, right?
Yeah.
You got to go in, you got to serve for a while, and then the church says you got to step out of the diaconate for a while, let other people serve, and then you can go back in. So could we say in our party rules, you're not eligible to run for this office if you've already served in the office, I don't know, 8 years, 10 years, 2 terms, 3 terms, you pick. I think that Supreme Court decision, Kucinich versus the Texas Democrat Party, said, yeah, parties can make those kind of rules. So whether you go all the way or not, you can have a voice in that process. If you have an opinion about that, then you can come to your precinct convention, you can come to your county or Senate district convention, and I'm going to say Senate district from here on out because I think with the exception of Greg and I, everybody in here has a Senate district convention to participate in. You can go to that Senate district convention and you can express those ideas, and the delegates who will be chosen to represent you at the state will have that information to carry forward. So what happens this year and how do you become a delegate? There has been in the election code, there has always been 2 mechanisms for becoming eligible to be a delegate at a convention. One's to vote in the primary, and the other is to swear an oath of affiliation. I was in the hospital when the election was going on, and I couldn't vote, but I swear that I'm affiliating myself with the Republican Party, and I'm not going to vote in the other parties. I'm not going to participate in the other parties' events, and that's called an oath of affiliation. Because we're having conventions this year on April 21st, and the primary is not until May 29th, your vote in the primary can't make you eligible to participate. So if you want to participate, you're going to have to take an oath of affiliation, and the oath of affiliation is towards the back of your packet. And I've got two different, I'm not exactly sure of why we have two different forms. One looks to me like you could take this oath and hand it to somebody to show evidence that you've taken the oath. The other one is when the oath is administered, I believe, to a block of people at one time. Everybody sign in, and now all of you people who sign this, raise your right hand and so solemnly swear as follows, and you're all going to take the oath, or all of you people take the oath, and then we're going to pass this around. You're going to sign that you took the oath. You do not have to have taken the oath to be chosen as a delegate. So anybody who's a registered voter who wants to participate in their Senate District Convention can show up at the convention and participate. But can show up at the convention. In order to participate, you're going to have to take the oath. By the same token, you may be elected by the people at your Senate District Convention to be a delegate to the state convention, and you might not be there. We know that woman, Deborah Medina, is from Wharton County. She goes to state convention. She represents our county every year, but she is out talking to other conventions today, and she's not here, but we want her to represent our county, so we're going to nominate her as a delegate to go to the Texas Republican Party State Convention to represent Wharton County. She's not physically present. Can she participate? Yes. She can be elected. If she shows up at the convention and she says, I'm not swearing an oath, and she hasn't voted in the party's primary, she will not be eligible to participate. She'll be elected as a delegate. She won't be allowed to participate. She won't be allowed to be seated unless she's either voted the state conventions after the primary. So by then, you can either have voted in the primary or have taken your oath of affiliation. Are there any questions about who can participate in the Senate District Conventions on April 21st? Sean?
Can you nominate someone in absentia?
Yes. So you're not going to be nominating people to participate in Senate District, because if they ain't there, they ain't participating, they're not there. Right. But you can nominate, that's what I'm saying. If that Deborah Medina's off doing something else and my delegates from my county know that they want to send me to state, I don't have to be there.
So when do you have to sign the affidavit?
Before you're seated at the convention you're elected to. Right. If you're going to vote at your Senate District Convention, you've got to sign an affidavit there. You've got to be, everybody who gets seated at the Senate District Convention is going to have to affiliate. You won't have a primary by then. So the only way for you to get a vote at your Senate District Convention is for you to affiliate with the party. And the only way to affiliate on April 21st is to take that oath.
So we can bring a list of names of people that can't make the senatorial, get them nominated, and maybe elected as delegates to the state?
And they don't have to have sworn an oath.
Okay.
But they'll have to swear an oath or vote before they're seated at the state.
Okay, so all they do is vote basically, or if they don't vote, then do it.
I think there was a single sheet of paper that you got, right? Okay, that's an email from Mr. Lewis, isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't have my copy for some reason. Okay, from the RPT, explaining that you do not have to be affiliated to be elected. You do have to affiliate to be seated. Okay? So if you want to send your spouse to the state convention or your neighbor, you can nominate them. It's foolish to nominate them if they're not a registered voter. They have to be a registered voter. They have to be in the district. You can't nominate me. I live in Galveston County. I can only be a district from Wharton County. But you can nominate people from within your district, and they can be elected to be state delegates. They will not be seated as state delegates unless by the time of the state convention they either affiliate or they voted in the primary. Any other? Yes, Matthew?
At what point in the convention can you make the nomination for someone who's not there? Is it the same as when you make nominations for people you're going to elect from your district? You're Secretary of State?
Yes, yeah, that'll happen, and we'll get into that in the agenda portion.
Okay, with that same concept, can you nominate an at-large, or only in your precinct?
Let me hit that when I get to rules. Okay. That gets you to who can participate on April 21st. What's the job of the Senate convention? Well, normally the job would be to consider resolutions that have come up from the precincts and to elect delegates to state. But having not had any precinct conventions, there's not any resolutions that committees can consider ahead of time. Maybe I should take 2 steps back. Let me see where I am in my little PowerPoint. Each Senate district has a caucus chairman, and that person, the person that's part of the executive committee, the county executive committee that I talked about before, that Senate district caucus chairman that's part of that local executive committee is deemed to be the temporary chair of the Senate caucus. You have to have somebody. Sarah was effectively that. She came in, she got this meeting going. That's a temporary person. At every convention, precinct, Senate district, and state, the election code prescribes an individual to be the temporary chair. That's just the person that calls it to order. That person is usually charged with either individually or through a committee making sure that the people that are there are eligible to participate. Do you all live in this district? Are you all registered voters? And have you affiliated with the Republican Party of Texas? And if you have, then you're eligible to participate in this convention. That's the first item of business, and I think it's on page 3 where we talk about the temporary chair works with the county chair to organize the convention. But there are things that need to happen to make the convention flow smoothly ahead of time. And so the Senate convention and the state convention both have temporary committees. This is where the new people really met with some hostility 4 years ago, because the election code and our party rules prescribe that the temporary chair will appoint a chairman and somewhere between 5 and 15 people to serve on these temporary committees. And the PowerPoint lays out, somebody get there before I do, the names of these committees. On page 6, credentials, rules, permanent organization, resolutions, and nominations. And I've kind of given you there a little bit about what each of those committees' responsibilities are. Any delegate is eligible to attend and speak to the committee. You do not have to be an appointed committee person. What's different in 2012 about these committees is you haven't affiliated yet. So the caucus chair is going to appoint a committee chair and a temporary committee chair, temporary committee members. Those folks are going to have to affiliate before they can begin to serve on that committee. You find out you're very interested in resolutions, and you want to go talk about the membership in the United Nations or gun laws or the border or healthcare, whatever it is, and you want to address this committee because you've got a resolution that you want to get passed. In order to speak to the committee, you have to be a delegate. How do you become a delegate? You have to affiliate with a party. You got to take the oath. So you can take the oath, and maybe you can use that little paper with the little square oath things on it. Take the oath, get an officer to sign off on that, and then you present it to the committee and say, look, I've affiliated, I'm going to be a delegate to my Senate District Convention, and I'd like to address the committee. Those committee meetings are happening probably between now and April 21st. So if you want to know about those meetings, if you just want to be on fly on the wall, so you understand, that was my suggestion 4 years ago, was a lot of preliminary preparation work happens in those temporary committees. If you kind of want to know the direction the nominations committee is going to take, if you want to know the direction the rules committee is going to take, you want to go to those temporary committee meetings. Call your Senate caucus chair, call the Harris County Republican Party and ask them who that person is and how you can get in touch with them. Maybe they've already got a list. You could tell them, I'd like to attend the temporary committee meetings. Do you know when and where they're being held? Texas Election Code and the party rules provide that those meetings have to be posted and they have to be open to any delegate. 4 years ago, we ran into all kinds of problems where people said, oh no, those are confidential meetings, you can't go, they're closed. If you have that problem, call Sarah or call Matthew or call me, and we will try to help you get that resolved. My counsel 4 years ago was to go to the Texas Election Code and to take that code to these individuals. Maybe in their defense, they've been given some bad counsel and they don't understand that these meetings are open and any delegate has to be allowed to attend. You have to affiliate to be a delegate. So if you show up and you don't have any evidence that you've affiliated, they may say, well, I don't have any evidence you're a delegate and it's only open to delegates, so you need to do that affiliation. So that work is going on ahead of time. You get to the convention, that temporary chair calls that convention to order, make sure that the people that are there are eligible to be there, and then adopts a credentials report to tell us we have 30 precincts here, the total voting strength is 300 delegates, and we have 180 people seated on the floor today. And the convention body accepts that report, or they move to amend that report. That's incorrect. We do have 30 precincts. We do have a total of 300 people, but we've got 30 people who are here that aren't registered to vote, and I move to strike them from being seated delegates at this convention, or whatever the objection is that you might have to some of those people being seated. That's essentially the first item of business at the convention, is to get that delegation seated. The next item of business at the convention is to hear a report from that temporary rules committee. The Texas Election Code and the party rules prescribe that we follow the law. They prescribe that we follow the party's rules. They prescribe that we use Robert's Rules of Order newly revised. And you might say that's all the rules we want to follow. But generally speaking, in a convention, somebody will have a bright idea about some supplemental rule. A supplemental rule might be so that we're not here until April 25th. I move that for each item that this convention considers, we limit speakers to 2 for and 2 against, each having 2 minutes to speak. That's a motion. It's debatable, it's amendable, but those are the kinds of things that you typically hear offered by that rules committee. Who comes up with that? The people that are sitting on that temporary rules committee, the people that are meeting, that were appointed by the Senate caucus chairman and that are meeting between now and April 21st. They're going to come up with a list. They're going to present it to you as a body, and you're going to be able to vote it up or down. You're going to be able to debate it. You're going to be able to amend it. So now you've got your body seated. You've got your rules for this meeting today. These are temporary rules, supplemental rules that we're going to use for this Senate District Convention on April 21st. They don't change the state party rules. They sure don't change the Texas Election Code. We're just adopting. We don't know what Senate District 9's doing or Senate District 15's doing. We're just adopting rules, supplemental rules for our meeting here today. How are we going to conduct ourselves? Once those 2 items of business are done, the delegation's seated, the rules are adopted, the next item of business is to elect your permanent chair. This Senate caucus chairman is just the temporary chair. This is your convention. and you get to choose who you want chairing your convention. You can choose that person, or you can choose someone else. And there is a permanent organization committee. That's one of the temporary committees that will have met. And so that temporary chair will say the next item of business is to hear the report of the permanent organization committee. Greg, you were chair. Thank you very much. Do you have a report to give us? And Greg stands up and he says, yes, Madam Chairman, the permanent organization committee would like to recommend Madam Chairman be the permanent chair of this convention, and they would like to recommend Sarah be the secretary. And the chairman should say, are there any other nominations? This is a debatable report. Is there any discussion? Sean will rise and say, man, I've been in conventions where Deborah Medina's been a chairman. She's a tyrant. She doesn't let anybody speak, and she hogs the floor, and we'll never get out of here. And I move to strike the name of Deborah Medina and insert the name of Greg Stissel to be the chair. That's an amendment. What happens in parliamentary procedure when an amendment's offered? Needs a second. Doesn't get a second, it dies. Everybody in the room thinks Sean's crazy. Deborah's a great chair. No second. Greg's name goes away. Deborah's name is still in. It's debatable. It's voted on. Now we've got a report that from the org committee that's been amended, and Greg's name is in and Sarah's name's in. Is there any other discussion? Somebody says, well, you can't read Sarah's handwriting. I mean, you'd have to have, you know, you just can't read it. I mean, it's awful. And she doesn't turn things in on time, and it's just going to be a mess, and I move. And so you vote on your permanent convention officers. Yes, sir.
What happens when you might want to explain what happens when there's an amendment upon an amendment, which isn't actually called an amendment upon amendment, but it's a further amendment.
Well, and that's why when you talk about the parliamentary process of when there's an amendment on an amendment, and this isn't a good example because inserting one person's name is kind of hard to amend an amendment, but
well, actually, you could say, well, instead of Greg's name, I want to amend and put my name, and then you vote on the latter. Right,
the most recently offered motion on the floor. And that's why when you're choosing that person, that's probably why there's a permanent organization temporary committee, because you don't want to just throw anybody into that role. You want to throw somebody into the role of chairman who understands the election code, the party rules, and the parliamentary procedure rules. They'll have a parliamentarian. They can appoint their own parliamentarian. The parliamentarian is the only person in a convention. You don't have a parliamentarian at your precinct convention, but you do have a parliamentarian at Senate District, you do have a parliamentarian at state, and they're the only people in the convention that don't have to be a member of the delegation. So if you're in Senate District, Sean, what are you? Senate District 11? 11 in Galveston County, everybody that's seated and everybody that's on the dais, the chairman, the secretary, the sergeant at arms, any other officers that you might want to elect that day, all of those people have to be registered voting individuals within Galveston County, Senate District 11, who have affiliated with the Republican Party, except the parliamentarian. If you need parliamentary expertise that you don't have in your district, if you're afraid that the guy that's been serving as parliamentarian is biased and you want some unbiased, you can try to recruit somebody from another county to come in. The parliamentarian is appointed by the chairman that you elect. So having a good chair, having a fair chair, and having a parliamentarian who understands those rules and will treat them fairly was the subject of a lawsuit that I did a couple of years ago against the Republican Party in Texas. Important if you want the will of the people. Man who helped mentor me is a guy named Robert X. Johnson out of San Antonio, and Bob reminded me that in our First Amendment Bill of Rights we have freedom of press, religion, speech, what else? Assembly. Why? He said, Deborah, why did the founders put that in there? I don't know, I hadn't even hardly thought about it. He said, because they understood there was wisdom in the minds of men. You don't have all the answers, and I don't have all the answers, and you don't have all the answers. But when we come together as a group, and my crazy idea gets floated, it might be loony as it can be, but there's some little jewel in there, and you think, you know what, that wouldn't work, but if we did this, it might. And collectively, that's called a deliberative assembly. It's what gives us the best answers to the problems that we face. They knew we needed those assemblies. But if that assembly is a railroad job, and if all of the decisions are made before you ever get there, it's a farce. You've got to put a chairman in place who will make sure, Robert X will say, nobody has the right to win. Everybody has the right to try. And you remember that when you're in the majority. Because there will come a time when you too can become a tyrant. Listen to the minority. Let them say their piece. Anybody in here pro-war? Anybody in here pro-peace? Let that pro-war get up guy and talk. And don't throw eggs at him. Let him say his, what'd you do, 2 minutes. You know, that supplemental rule's important. You can say your piece and we'll listen to you for 2 minutes. And when you sit down and everybody says all those in favor of John's pro-war resolution, say aye. And you hear a pin drop. All those opposed, no. The whole room says no. And he gets it real clear that you're all opposed. He had the right to try, and he'll come back and he'll stay engaged because he might have a great pro-gun resolution or a great immigration thing or a great health care thing. He just doesn't quite understand the war thing yet. Nobody has a right to win. Everybody has a right to try. And if we'll remember that, whether we have the majority in a room or not, I think we'll have a much stronger party, a much stronger public policy debate. And so I hope you'll keep that in mind. So now we're to the point in our convention where we're electing our own permanent chair. In most organizations run under parliamentary rules, the chairman appoints committee chairman. So just like the temporary chair was able to appoint the committee chairman of those 5 credentials, rules, nominations, permanent organization, resolutions, the chair of the convention will now appoint the permanent chair of the nominations committee and the permanent chair of the platform of the resolutions committee. We've already done rules. We don't need another rules committee. We've already done credentials, although there may be some challenges to credentials. You don't see that committee getting reappointed. And permanent organization, we've elected our officers. So the only 2 committees left to work are nominations and resolutions. And the chairman, the newly elected permanent convention chair, this isn't the precinct chair of your county party executive committee. This isn't your party county chair. This is the person that's chairing this meeting on April 21st and only this meeting. They have the shortest term of office of any political office ever held. They do a convention and they're done. That person appoints the permanent nominations committee and the permanent resolutions committee. 1994 in Wharton County, we didn't like the direction the county had been going for a number of years, and the county party chair wasn't working with the delegates. And so the permanent org committee put his name into nomination to be the chair of the convention, and the grassroots put our guy up, and our guy won. And he got up and he said to the temporary nominations committee and the temporary resolutions committee, thank you very much for your service. I now appoint you people. And nobody who had been on that temporary committee returned to the permanent committees. And the permanent committees started their work from scratch. And that can happen if you have done your homework ahead of time. It may be a good thing to happen. It may not be a good thing to happen. Many of you are here because you're interested in who's going to the National Convention. And you want to see people that think like you do. That ought to be our goal always, right? People who think like we do serving, whether it's in public office or political office. And those are people we want to put in charge. One of the things that I've heard bantered about in the last couple of weeks is there was There have been these kind of grassroots movements in political parties over the years, and probably the last big one spawned the Christian Coalition, and Pat Robertson came out of the Pat Robertson campaign, and that had been 80s, late 70s, early 80s. And the supposition was made that that maybe failed, that it didn't have the long-lasting, it's had some impact, but maybe not the long-lasting impact that they had hoped for, because it was what we called a scorched earth policy. We ain't taking any of you people that don't agree with us. We may only have 51% of the room, but that's a majority, and none of you get to go. The proposal has been floated that if you control, if you're in the 51, you might like that deal. How do you feel about it if you're in the 49? You want the 51 taking 100%? How much should the 51 get? 51. That's fair. Everybody has a right to win. Everybody has a right to try. You got 51% of the room. You ought to get 51% of the delegation. We show up with 85% of the room. We ought to get 85% of the delegation. You're going to have to decide in your own individual areas whether you want to do scorched earth, if you have the strength to do that, or whether you want to split those delegations up and let them be representative of the people that showed up. In Harris County, did you ask a question about your individual precincts? Many of the larger counties divide their allocated delegates amongst their precincts.
State delegates?
State delegates. In normal years, the precinct convention is open to anyone who voted in that primary can be a delegate at precinct. All you do is show up. There's no election to go to that. You just show up. This year, you just show up to Senate District Convention. But the number of delegates that you're entitled to have at your Senate District Convention is based on the number of votes that Rick Perry got in November of 2010. It's based on the number of votes, or that Bill White, if you're going to a Democrat convention. It's based on the number of votes that your party's candidate for governor got in the last general election. The last time we elected a governor in Texas was November of 2010. Republican Party nominee was Rick Perry. So for your Senate District Convention, your precinct is entitled, I should have asked for a whiteboard. Can we get that? Is there a pen for that one? Your precinct is entitled to one vote, one delegate vote, for every 25 votes that were cast for Rick Perry. So if in my precinct there were 100 votes for Rick Perry in November of 2010, then my precinct gets 4 votes at the Senate District Convention. Yes, sir.
4 and 4 or 2 and 2? Is that 4 delegates plus 4 alternates?
Yes.
2 plus 2?
4 and 4.
4 and 4.
You get 1 delegate for each 25 votes for the governor at the Senate District Convention. You get 1 delegate for each 300 votes at the state convention. In small counties, we just send a county delegation. But I believe in Harris County, you adopt a rule that your state allocation is proportioned amongst the precincts. Is that right? Y'all adopt a rule, or I'm saying y'all, are you from Harris County?
Yeah.
You adopt a rule that your state delegation will be apportioned amongst your precincts. Mm-hmm. And you also do some at-larges? Mm-hmm. Do you know how you determine how many are at-large and how many are out of your precinct?
It's in the rules. I read it a couple days ago, but I don't remember.
It's in the party rules. Y'all have adopted it as like a Harris County Republican Party bylaw rule?
Yeah, I think it's,
There was 2 rules that were released in PDF form on the Harris County website.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember. I don't have it in front of me right now.
Okay.
now I thought it was from population, but maybe I am completely wrong.
So in these Senate districts where you're electing delegates to state from within your precinct, there's also going to be a vote for some at-large people. But the ultimate number of how many people do we get to send from our Senate district will be 1 delegate for every 300 votes that were cast in your Senate district in the last governor's race. In a normal year, I'm electing 4. I said my precinct cast 100 votes. My precinct gets to send 4 delegates to the Senate District Convention. Whether I send 1 or I send 4, I get 4 votes. In the Senate District, in the Precinct Convention, it's 1 man, 1 vote. You want to be a delegate, you vote in the primary, you show up precinct, you get to vote. No precincts this year. You show up at Senate District, it's not 1 man, 1 vote. Anybody who wants to show up can show up, but my precinct still only gets 4 votes. So if 8 people show up, how many votes do we get? We each get 1/2 of 1 vote. And that's where you need a spreadsheet so somebody can vote on delegate strength, because both the Texas Election Code and the Republican Party rules say that you are entitled to vote your delegate strength. It does not say you must. Did any of you watch the Texas legislature general sessions this year where you saw the floor, the House floor, or the Senate floor? Larry Taylor is the Republican caucus chair, right? Sean's state rep. What did he do when Republicans were supposed to vote yes? If you're the lead guy, sorry, I'm not standing in front of the camera. If you're the lead guy and you're making the motion, that ought to be a pretty good signal to all the rest of you in the room who don't quite really understand what's going on, but know that he's been training and he's been working and he's striking somebody off of 172 and inserting Greg. You're probably going to vote yes when that comes up. But if there's any doubt and it's a big convention, you might want some captains, and 1 is yes and 2 is no. And when you see those people, you look for them. If you don't know what's going on, you find somebody you trust and get them to help you with those votes. They've done all kinds of things if you want them to be secret. You know, we've run a red rubber band on one arm and a blue rubber band on the other. Blue's Democrat, that's no. Red's yes. I mean, figure out caps. People have gone in with caps. Look for the guy with the cap and the sunglasses on his hat. Those are our team captains. Figure out what you're going to do as you begin to work together. The more people you can get to know from your precinct and from your Senate district before you get to convention, the more effective you'll be in convention. Yes, sir.
So that went precinct conventions, nominations committee, and then general floor amendment.
And we really don't, I think what you're meaning there when you say precinct convention is probably precinct caucus, because the convention is going to recess for these permanent committees to meet, and it says in the agenda for precincts to caucus. So in those counties where we've adopted a rule that we're going to elect our delegates with in proportion to the precinct proportionally, then everybody that's a delegate from your precinct is going to get together. You should be seated together anyway, because if there's a division, everybody that's present and seated has a right to vote on that issue. You need them all there. And precinct delegations can handle that however they want to. You can do a ballot when there's a division. You can just ask people if they're voting yes or no. Many people feel have very strong ties to wanting to keep their vote secret, whether it's a vote in a convention or whether it's a vote in the ballot box. And so if you're preparing yourself ahead of time, you might think to take some slips of paper, because if you do a division, you're going to need to have a piece of paper that you can pass around. And now you two get to be an election judge. We have 20 people here. I'm going to make sure I pass out 20 slips of paper and I get 20 slips of paper back, so that I know everybody just got, 1 vote.
Can you touch on, I've tried to explain it to people and it's kind of confusing. If they don't get elected in their precinct, that they can go for an at-large.
And not having a copy of that rule, I don't. I'm assuming that there's going to be some posting somewhere that tells you, you've got 2 and 2. But there's also going to be this at-large body. At the state convention, we have 100, we're entitled to, I believe it's 152 delegates to the national convention. Each congressional district will elect 3 delegates. What's 36 times 3? 108?
32 or 36?
36 this cycle. I believe that's right. Yes.
6 delegates.
So you got 108 coming from your congressional district caucus. That means you got 42 coming out of that at-large nominating committee. And so I don't know the process that you use in Harris County for that at-large. Is it the permanent nominating committee probably that does that?
Say we go into precinct
Caucuses.
and we kind of vote, say, just like your story, you have 4, but you really have 6 people that you want to go on. And if you can get those 2 on to the at-large, they have to fill out a form and, say all kinds of stuff, their credentials and stuff like that. Then it goes, the form will go to the nominations committee and they'll approve it, or
probably the earlier you get that to them, the better.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think that's how I didn't know that you could do that in 2008.
That's why the earlier the better.
Yeah. In 10 that we could go the ones that couldn't get on.
It's always a little bit risky because, and you'll see this happening in the congressional caucuses at the state convention. If you think you can get elected in your caucus, you stay in your caucus and try. But in the meantime, the at-large group is meeting and they're picking. And so if you chose to run in your caucus and you didn't make it, by the time you decide, I didn't make it there, I got to go down here and try for the at-large, they may have already kind of signed, sealed, and delivered most of the 42 at-larges that they're going to pick. Still amendable, debatable, on the floor. So your precinct could probably make a compelling argument that the at-large committee didn't pick the best 2 people, and we really want to strike, X and put in Y. That's the next item of business. Convention adjourns, permanent chair is picked, permanent committees are appointed, convention goes into recess, not adjourns. Recesses, precincts caucus, permanent committees meet, permanent committees finish meeting, convention is reconvened. Next item of business is nominations. You elect your state party, your state convention delegates, your state convention alternates, and the final item of business of the convention is to hear the report of the resolutions committee. And you, again, have the opportunity to debate and amend that report until you have signed off on resolutions that will be sent to the state party in hopes that they will be ultimately adopted into the Texas Republican Party platform. Yes, sir.
One more question. At the executive committee meeting last night, they passed a resolution that eliminated any speaking fee for candidates running for office. So this could be a very lengthy convention. Do you know at which point during the convention the candidates will be speaking? Is that going to be after delegate nominations, before, or is that something?
Does anybody have a copy of Robert's Rules?
Yeah, on my laptop.
Look, can you check in there, Matthew, for orders of the day and see what it has to say about orders of the day? The agenda for the convention is prescribed in the Texas Election Code. I think I made a reference in your PowerPoint, but it's chapter 174 of the Texas Election Code.
And the reason I ask is I've got a handful of people in my neighborhood who are willing to go to the convention with me. They don't really want to be delegates, but they're willing to vote for me. But I thought this would be a couple-hour thing, but it's looking like it could be all day and all night, and
it will be
a little bit of a tougher sell.
Right. It will be lengthy. Now, delegates can participate at any time that they show up. So if they can be on standby and you say we're finally getting to that part where I'm going to need you, they can come. But remember that you get to vote your delegate strength regardless of, well, you've got people from your precinct is what you're saying, right? And without them, you might not have a majority. Is that your thinking? Okay.
With them, I definitely have a majority.
Okay, okay. So then you want them there. If you have a majority without them, then it's not as critical.
Absolutely.
But if you don't, then you need them there. They can show up and begin to participate at the point of their arrival at any point through the process.
Deborah, could they just, I know what you're talking about, maybe by the time the nominations committee, we vote, we get anything that you want to add on there or whatever, actually they can leave from there.
That's what I was hoping.
Yes.
Yes,
Now,
they
we're
can, you
done
can,
doing delegates
and you
and
can do
Once
both.
they vote for the delegates, you can tell them they're gone, they can leave.
You can do both. You can come in at the beginning and get your credentials and get your name tag and leave and then come back. You have to check out with the credentials table usually when you do that. Some counties have lost their quorum. That's potentially a problem if you really make everybody in the delegation angry and they just decide to pick up their marbles and go home and you don't have a quorum. But lack of a quorum cannot prevent the work of the nominations committee. So having people come in or having people come in and leave doesn't preclude the people that remain from nominating. It precludes them from doing resolutions. If you don't have a quorum, you can't do resolutions. But it does not preclude the business of nominating and choosing delegates to the state convention. So they can come in at any point. In a normal year, they would have had to have been elected at the precinct convention to be a delegate to Senate district. But that ain't true this go round. Anybody who lives in your precinct who's a registered voter who will affiliate with the Republican Party when they show up at that convention can be a vote at that convention. Yes, Ann?
And they do have to have already been registered to vote when they get to the convention.
Yes, there's an email. I made a copy of an email that kind of outlines that. I think it's still a little bit muddy in my mind because you're not eligible to vote until 30 days after you register to vote. And so I'm a little unclear as to whether it's I've registered to vote or I'm eligible to vote. And I don't know, let me look at that email again. Yeah, a delegate who has recently registered must have his or her registration effective. In Texas, this process takes 30 days. So if they have not registered to vote by March 21st, which is now passed, they're not going to be, let me read the whole sentence. A delegate who has recently registered must have his or her registration effective by the time of the convention he serves as a delegate in.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so anybody who wants to vote on April 21st has to have been a registered voter in that Senate district by March 21st. But that doesn't preclude somebody that registered on April 1st from being a delegate to state.
Right.
Got it?
Right, but someone else who is eligible to vote at the Senate district one has to get their name in and get it.
Correct. They have to be elected.
Yeah.
You have to be seated as a delegate at state convention, to vote as a delegate at state convention. You have to be elected to that position at your Senate district convention. Sean?
I don't recall getting my voter registration card.
Voter registration cards until April 25th, and you can register to vote and have your application approved and put into the system with the driver's license Up to a week before the convention.
They're gonna
They're
verify.
gonna have voter rolls at the convention? Is that how they're
You
gonna
must
verify?
slide your driver's license electronically and it will print out all your information that is on the voter rolls. And if you're not on the voter rolls, then it will not print out any information.
And I think that's where some of the controversy has come in, and so that's why I gave you a copy of that email from Jesse Lewis from the RPT, so you can take that with you if there's questions. You're saying that you can participate within a week of your registration. This is saying you're not active until 30 days, and so ultimately your credentials committee will rule on that at the state convention. I think if you have a question about that or you want additional clarification, I'd suggest that you call the Republican Party between now and the convention date. That email there, I just redacted the individual's name that the email was sent to, but otherwise it's got all of the stuff on there, so it shows who it's come from, and hopefully it'll be a valid piece of documentation for you at your convention. Did you find orders of the day?
I found orders of the day, but not the orders of the day.
But does it say you can call for, and I think to your question of we're hearing from all of these elected officials, elected official after, that's a technique called running out the clock. Happens at the state convention. We exhaust the delegates. So there is no wisdom in the assembly because we have waterboarded everybody all day. And now by the time we get around to the really important stuff, your tempers
what
about
all those speeches are
that's
about?
what that's all been about. It's a way to control the convention and make sure that it goes the direction you want by exhausting everybody. There is a parliamentary motion that you simply rise and say, I call for the orders of the day. And that means, and that's why I wanted that to be read, it means I get back to the agenda. There's a prescribed agenda in the Texas Election Code, and while we appreciate the service that these good men and women offer our county, we have a job to do. Questions? Okay, yeah, Ann.
When you were talking before about the number of delegates that we're going to be sending, and you said you have 36 per congressional district?
No, 36 congressional districts in Texas, and each district sends 3 delegates and 3 alternates to the national convention. And then the remaining delegates from Texas are elected by an at-large, are nominated by an at-large committee. The delegates from the congressional district are elected in congressional district caucus, which will occur on Saturday. That's not debatable or amendable on at the general session of the convention. The at-larges are. The at-large delegates to national convention it'll be a report from a nominating committee, and that report, like any other report, is amendable, debatable, and can be voted on.
But these conventions are arranged by Senate district.
Okay. Earlier, it is confusing. Earlier I was talking about every 2 years we have a state convention, but in presidential election years, we also have a Republican National Convention, and we send delegates to the Republican National Convention. In non-presidential years, the state convention is a 2-day affair. In presidential election years, it's a 3-day affair. So the convention this year will be Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. If you went 2 years ago in 2010, it was Friday, Saturday. Yeah. The Texas Election Code lays out the order of business for the precinct convention, for the county and Senate district conventions, and for the state convention. And the order of business is the same in every convention. The convention is convened by the temporary chair. The delegates present are credentialed and voted on to make sure that we've seated an eligible delegation. The supplemental rules are adopted. The body elects its permanent chairman. The committees are appointed. The committee work is done. The committee reports are voted on. The convention adjourns. If you've ever been to a state convention in Texas, probably if you were there prior to 1992, it was done differently. But in 92 or 94, it changed Do you remember what you did in the first general session of the last state convention? You listened to elected official after elected official after elected official after elected official. You didn't vote on anything. You were late getting to your first Senate District caucus. In April, you were going to convene Senate District conventions on April 21st in your county for your Senate District. Sean is in Galveston County, Senate District 11. Senate District 11 also crosses over into Brazoria County. You're not going to meet with the Galveston County people on April 21st, but when you get to the state convention, all 32 Texas Senate districts will caucus. And when you get to that Senate District 11 caucus at the state convention, it will have delegates from Galveston County and delegates from Brazoria County. And in that Senate District caucus at the state convention, you will elect your committeeman and committeewoman to serve on the Texas Republican Party Executive Committee. You will elect your, boy, I got to backpedal again. Remember I talked about at your Senate District convention that the temporary chair was appointing temporary committees? The state party chair appoints temporary committees in preparation for the state convention. What committees? Credentials, permanent organization, rules, resolutions, same deal. Those committees will have met. Who's on those committees? It is one person from each Senate district in the state that's on the temporary committee. And those people are nominated by the committeeman and committeewoman from that Senate district. So your Senate District 11 committeeman and committeewoman will submit to Steve Munisteri 5 names. One name for each of the 5 temporary committees. And he will either approve those or he will pick somebody, or he will punt back to that person and say, I don't think this person will be productive on that committee and I'd like you to give me another name. Those folks will serve on the temporary committees. They will meet the week prior to the state convention. They'll either be convened on Monday or Tuesday, and they will work all day Tuesday and all day Wednesday.
So we're still going to choose our delegates at the Senate District Convention by our county within that Senate District. It's when they get beyond that that it becomes important what congressional district they're from.
So Friday and Saturday, when you go to your first Senate District caucus, you're going to hear the report. You're going to be convened by temporary chair. You're going to make sure everybody in there. How many delegates does Brazoria County have here? How many delegates does Galveston County? Are y'all the only 2 counties in Senate District 11, or does it cross over into Harris?
No,
okay.
Harris.
Okay, so you're going to have Harris and Brazoria and Galveston.
Yeah. And
you're going to make sure, you know, you're going to kind of pick a delegate. Each county will pick kind of their own little delegation chairperson. And when the secretary calls for Brazoria, how many people do you have present? And says, Brazoria, you're entitled to 12 delegates here, and you have 10 people on the floor. You get to vote your delegate strength, so we know you're getting 12 votes all day long, even though you only have 10 people. We're going to elect our permanent chair. We're going to elect our permanent secretary. And on Friday, in our first Senate District caucus at the state convention, we're going to hear reports from those temporary committee members. And then we're going to elect permanent committee members. Sometimes you like the temporaries that your party establishment executive committee picked, and sometimes you don't. And you get to elect as a caucus your permanent members. And that's all the business that you do in Senate caucus on the first day. And we've always done that on the first day, but we have not in nearly 20 years done any business in the first general session. That's going to be Thursday. Thursday morning, general session. Thursday afternoon, Senate caucus. Let me walk through the state agenda. Friday morning, you're going to come back to Senate caucus. You're not going to go to a general session. You're going to come straight back to your Senate caucus room, and you're going to elect your state Republican Party Executive Committee man and committee woman, and you're going to vote for the state party chair and vice chair. You will have heard nominating speeches from them by that point, and you will just vote in caucus for those folks that are running for state party chair and vice chair. That's all the business that the Senate caucus does. You choose your permanent committee members, You elect your state Republican Party committee man and committee woman, and you vote for state party chair and vice chair. 2 meetings, one on Friday afternoon, one on Thursday afternoon, and one on Friday morning. You will leave that caucus and go back to the second general session. In the second general session, what we've been doing for 20 years is electing the convention chairman. What's wrong with that picture? The chairman's supposed to be elected before you do any business. That's what the law says. I sued the party in 2008 to make them follow the law. The agenda, I'm going to get chill bumps, the agenda that has been floated for this convention says we're going to elect the chairman in the first general session. So 4 years later, we're finally, well, nobody is going to say Deborah Medina was right all along. So don't hold your breath. But the draft agenda that we have seen, and it's a draft because the SREC does not vote on it until the day before the convention. But the draft right now says we're going to have an opening prayer. We're going to hear the national anthem. We're going to say the Pledge of Allegiance. We're going to see an elephant video. We're going to have a welcome by Steve Munisteri. He's going to introduce Anita Perry. She's going to introduce Rick Perry. We're going to be nice. We're going to hear remarks from the individuals that are running. We're going to elect a permanent chair. We're going to hear reports from the temporary committees, and we're going to hear Thursday in the first general session. One elected official, the governor and his wife, and that's it. The rest of it's business. We're going to hear temporary committee reports. We're going to elect a permanent chair of the convention. You elect as delegates who you want to chair that convention. You want somebody who's going to say, nobody has a right to win, but everybody has a right to try and rule accordingly? Or are you going to have someone who railroads an agenda through? And I'll get on my soapbox because I can. I got the microphone right now. A lot of grassroots people advocated for the wrong reasons the ouster of the Speaker of the Texas House. Was all about philosophy. He doesn't believe like I do, and forgot totally about the job of the chairman is to wield that gavel. I don't care what you believe as chair. What I want to know is when I make a valid motion, are you going to rule and let me get that motion on the floor, or are you going to call me out of order? And we've got to get better at making sure that the people that we put in charge of these deliberative assemblies allow the deliberation to occur. And a lot of that argument that happened over that speaker, and it's going to happen again. I'm sure not arguing for the re-election of Strauss. What I'm arguing for is that we pay attention to who we're choosing. Scorched earth or choosing a guy that's going to railroad our way is no better than them choosing a guy that's going to railroad their way. And that's what that was about. That argument was about, I want my tyrant in there. It wasn't about, are we going to have a fair and just guy? And you saw what happened, particularly if you watched the TSA deal. You saw how a chairman can change. The body had unanimously adopted David Simpson's anti-TSA groping measure twice, and the chairman killed it. You better pick a fair chairman. We haven't had that in state conventions because the delegates have not been able to pick the chairman until all the business of the convention was over with. Right. So the election code says that's one of the first items of business, and in the floated agenda, it's going to occur on Thursday morning. Thursday afternoon's the first Senate caucus. Friday morning's the second Senate caucus. Friday afternoon's the second general session. Now we hear the permanent Rules Committee, General Rules for all conventions and meetings adopted by the Republican Party of Texas in 2010. You're going to hear the Permanent Rules Committee. You want a term limits rule so that nobody who's been in office for X number of years can be eligible to run. This is where it goes. Those are the kinds of things that you can get into rules. You're going to hear that permanent committee report, and you're going to have an opportunity on Friday afternoon to debate and amend that Rules Committee report. You're also going to then do the platform. Actually, I think we do the platform. Do we do the platform first? I think, I think the platform goes first, and then you're so exhausted because you've worried about, remember what I said in the beginning, this platform that nobody pays attention to anyway, and the thing that really has teeth, you got up and went home for, because you're toast. It might be different this year because now you're not going home on Friday. Because what you came for, many of you, is what happens on Saturday. Saturday morning, you'll convene.
So let me ask you, could you just show up on Saturday?
You could. Okay? Yes, if you're elected, yes, you can.
Because I noticed a lot of people weren't there the first day.
I think actually in that agenda, I'm pretty confident. Yeah, I know we do. We're not done when we're done with the general session on Friday. We have on Friday evening, Friday afternoon, our first congressional caucus. That's a harder caucus for me. I've been doing this since the early 90s. I know the people in my Senate district. 18 counties, Senate District 18 counties. We've been going to convention together. You get to know those people and you get to work with them. You see them every 2 years. Congressional caucus, a whole different set of people.
Right.
Whole different.
It'll be new this year too, right?
Yeah, because now the lines have been redrawn. So you're in a totally, I used to be in Congressman Paul's 10-county district. Now I'm in Congressman, I guess Blake Farenthold essentially, but his district's completely redrawn, so he didn't even know his own district because it was 5 counties going south and now it's 13 counties coming this way. So my county is now part, I think there's about 7 counties in my new district that were in my old district. But there's 6 counties we've never met with before. We don't know any of those folks. So you're going to go to your congressional district caucus on Friday afternoon, convened by a temporary chair. You're going to hear your reports of how big your delegations are. You're going to elect a permanent chair, and you're going to elect a nominations committee member because you're going to have 3 delegates from your congressional district, but Texas is going to have 42 at-larges. And so each congressional district is going to send 1 person. These people I don't know from counties I've never worked with. I'm going to pick 1 person. Somebody's going to put up a name, or 2 or 3 or 10, and we're going to choose 1 person to represent us, represent our congressional district on the at-large nominating committee. Typically, that at-large nominating has your statewide elected officials. It has Senator Hutchison and Senator Cornyn and you know, Representative Louis Gohmert and Ted Poe and various dignitaries who would like to be part of the national delegation, and then alternates for all of those folks. I think you'll hear some nominating speeches probably for your national committee man and committee woman. Bill Crocker is our national committee man, and I think he's term limited out, so we will at least have a contest probably for national committee man. Be pretty unusual for only 1 individual to seek that slot, so you probably have at least 2 people running for national committee man. And Bora Van Dormelen is our national committee woman. I assume she's running for re-election. This is her first term, and actually she's filling an unexpired term, so she's really eligible to run 2 full terms. And whether or not anyone will challenge her for that, but you'll hear nominating speeches for those people in that first congressional caucus. Your Senate caucus at state convention and your Senate district convention on April 21st, you are entitled to vote your delegate strength. You've got 4 delegates, you're entitled to 4 delegates, you get 4 votes, whether there's 1 person there or 4 people there. Or in the case of the Senate district, there might be 12, because anybody can come, but you're only going to get 4 votes if you're doing a division. In your congressional caucus, it's 1 man, 1 vote. So if your county is entitled, first year that we were in with Galveston County, Ron's district had been redrawn. We got this huge section of delegates from Galveston County, Galveston County and Brazoria County, Congressman Paul had 10 districts: Galveston, Brazoria, Matagorda, Wharton, part of Fort Bend, down to Aransas. Galveston and Brazoria had about 75% of the vote in the whole district. And so the Galveston County chair came up to me, little rural Wharton County chairman, and said, look, I've got some people that I really want to go to the national convention. And if you'll help me get them there, I'll let you rural counties have 2 delegates. But if you won't help me get the people that I want to go, we're going to take all of them. And they could, because they had 75% of the vote. We could have stood up and screamed all day long and not sent one single person from anywhere except Galveston, Brazoria County. So you'll see those kind of power plays going on when you get to the state convention, and that's why the work that you do from now until then is so critical if you want to have an influence at the national convention. And I would say, you know, every cycle you hear people like me stand up and say, this is the most critical election of our lifetime. This cycle, I think it's pretty widely speculated, at least, that you're going to have a brokered convention. What does that mean? And does it matter in Texas? Texas has historically bound its national delegates to the primary. So we sent 100 people, but in 2008, John McCain got more than 50% of the vote in Texas. If you were a presidential candidate and you got more than 50% of the vote in the primary, Texas was a winner-take-all state. You got all 100 delegates. And it didn't matter who that delegate favored. They were bound under Texas rules to vote for the candidate who won the primary. There were some little hiccups in there that said if nobody gets 50%, then the top 3 vote getters, and we kind of divvied it up. But you were bound as national delegates to vote. So you didn't even need to be there because the delegation chair knew 100 votes from Texas are going to John McCain. Doesn't really matter what these people want to do because they're bound. And you'd see these delegation chairmen, when they were calling for the votes, the state of Texas is proud to cast all 100 votes. Delegates didn't do anything because they were bound. This year, you're only bound in the first round, and then you're unbound. So the political persuasion of the individuals that we send to the national convention is of much greater significance in 2012 than it's been in our lifetime, because we're likely to have, well, most of our lifetimes. I think they had a brokered convention way back when, but it's been a long time since we've had a brokered convention.
Reagan was last time, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I don't know that history that well.
They might have had one in '64. My mother came home.
I was going to say
about
Goldwater and
yeah. In '64, I know my mom went to the state and she came home telling all about the crazy things they did. Yeah.
So, what does that mean, a brokered convention? What it means is there isn't any candidate likely to walk into the national convention with enough bound delegates to secure the nomination.
It means it's not a formality.
So that first round, everybody votes how they're bound to vote.
Can you abstain?
Not if you're bound. Yeah, but not if you're bound. So your delegation was voting like it was bound. If nobody has enough delegates bound to secure the nomination, then we do a vote, and the binding delegates vote the way they want to. Some states aren't binding anybody, and so those people vote their conscience. We see where we are, and then the guys at the bottom start to work with the rest of the delegates to figure out who they're going to vote for. Where are Gingrich's delegates going to go? Where are Santorum's delegates going to go? And you begin to then take a second vote. And on that second vote, all the Texas delegates are unbound, so they can vote their conscience. Ann?
what happens to the delegate, the people who would have supported those candidates who have now dropped out in the early primaries? Like, what happens with up north with Michelle Botman's people, or any of the people, Cherries? Do they just proportionally go to the other candidates, or do they?
It depends on what that state's rules are. Remember that a lot of these things that we've considered primaries are really just non-binding referendums, and so they really haven't had an impact on the choosing of the actual delegates going to the conventions. But each state has its own rules about Galveston County says, well, you know, tell me about that person, and you begin to ask those kind of questions and figure out where people stand. It all comes down to what your vote strength is in that caucus, and in the congressional caucus, it's one man, one vote. So this is not near enough people at a training to control conventions in Harris County. If you want to be in that 51%, if you want to be certain that you can elect, and I know Ron Paul well enough to know that he would never say he wants Ron Paul. This isn't about that human being. It is about a set of ideas and beliefs that protect freedom and liberty that are established in our Constitution. I want constitutionalists going. I want people that think like Thomas Jefferson. I want people that think like James Madison. I want people that think like Ron Paul representing me, whether they represent me at my Senate District Convention or my state convention or my national convention. And you have an unusual opportunity this year because the state party chose to dissolve precinct conventions. And where you would have been limited in the past to having 4 people show up and say aye, you can now bring 40 to show up and say aye. And the delegation will get pretty hostile towards you if you call for a division every time there's a vote. So if you bring a large contingent of people, you have the ability to outvote other delegations who are entitled to even more voting strength. Of course, if we did that in every delegation, it wouldn't be an issue. We'd have the majority all around. So I know Sarah and Matthew have a voter ID list, people that have already identified themselves as thinking in a politically similar vein, and they need a phone call, they need a knock on their door, they need invitation to attend that convention. And so if you can help with that calling, you help yourself to have a more successful convention. Y'all have been a great audience. I've talked for nearly 2 hours. It's a complex process, and if you haven't been in the nitty-gritty, you learn a little bit more each time you go. Look to people who have been around for a while. Take the time to read the Texas Election Code. It's, you know, the Texas Election Code on conventions is shorter than the party rules. Read the law, read the rules that we've adopted, print them off, take them with you so you have a good reference, you understand what's going on. If you have the opportunity to attend the temporary committees before the convention, you'll learn a lot. You'll get to know the people. You'll get to know a little bit about how they play the game, a little bit about what they think, and be a little bit better prepared to walk into that district convention. My personal email address, because I need to keep this away from the nonprofit and away from my medical billing business, is deborahpmedina@gmail.com. I try really hard to respond. Certainly we'll try to serve as